always falls to me to try to sum everything up and tie everything up with a little ribbon at the end, which is always quite a challenge here with our IMTFI conferences. But I do have a few sort of overall thoughts that I'd like to leave us with for now, maybe some things that we can pick up in the closed session tomorrow. And again, the closed session tomorrow is just for the funded researchers, and transport will be provided at your hotel at 8:30. I believe Jenny has distributed a piece of paper that has instructions and all that to get you there. And this evening, the buses here are going to come around 5:20, 5:30 to pick people up to go to the restaurant. And the restaurant for dinner is right next to the hotel. So, people can sort of walk back to the hotel as they keel over from lack of sleep and jet lag, or stay as long as they like. So let me just sort of say a couple of things by way of summation, and then do some other work here too. I think that, to the extent that the IMTFI research and conferences have been focused in some way on the emerging mobile money phenomenon. And I know not all the papers are about mobile money. A lot of them are about sort of existing financial practices and money practices. But to the extent that they have been focused on the mobile channel for transactions, one of the things that we've been asking is what happens when a new platform is put in place. What does it do? What are some of the social implications? What are some of the implications for poverty alleviation? What are some of the implications for reducing the cost of transactions, especially for the poor? And I guess some of the things that we've come to along that strain of the research that we've been doing has led us really to query the question itself and to ask, well, really, are we talking about a whole platform? Are we talking about a whole platform that's sort of plopping down a whole sort of operating system, like Windows comes and lands or something like that, or the Apple operating system comes and lands? Or are we talking really about what the payments industry professionals like Carol Benson would call the building of a new rail, the building of a new set of railways to carry value, much as the card networks and the debit networks carry value from place to place? Are we talking about a whole system, or are we talking about just one bridge? Now, on the question of are we talking about a whole system, there's a sense in which the world has never really seen the adoption of one whole system, one whole platform for money and for value, right? This isn't just a lesson of anthropology, that there's lots of diversity and lots of plurality in economy and in modes of reckoning value and transferring and saving value. This is an everyday reality right here in the States, even if we think about digital money, right? So I have in my wallet a whole bunch of basically non-interoperating, digital forms of payment here. Some of them will work with each other, some of them not. But when I use them, like as not, they're all being used on different sets of rails which connect to one another, sometimes seamlessly, sometimes not so seamlessly. So, even here in the developed world, we're always talking about not one whole system, but an interlocking set of rails. Now, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute, actually, because I think that there is one thing that we've got that is almost like a whole system. The next thing, too, though, is if we're talking about not a whole platform, but really just a rail, really just one bridge, well, what sort of bridge is it, and what's carried over that bridge? Is it a bridge for carrying money from person A to person B? Is it that kind of, person-to-person bridge? Or in some of the work that we're generating here out of IMTFI, do we need to think about things like bridges between gold and loans, and how possibly the mobile channel ends up intermediating or somehow assisting in the linkage between gold and loans? I'm thinking of Nitya's paper from whenever that was, this morning or yesterday, I don't remember. And incidentally, it was her very first presentation at a conference, so I'm just going to embarrass her right now and let you all know that, and I think she did a fantastic job for that it was her first time doing this. Or can we imagine something like, a bridge between friendship circles, and I'm thinking of Devine's work here, and the capital markets and large-scale, markets. A bridge between, to use Sean's terms, one sort of cosmoeconomic system and another cosmoeconomic system. A bridge between the world of Islamic banking rendered in orthodox terms or Islamic banking rendered in the everyday terms that came up in Bridget's talk. A bridge, and this is sort of creepy and weird, but I'm just going to say it, like a bridge between, life and death, because we had some very interesting stuff coming up through a lot of the talks about the bridge between life and death and, the reckoning books in heaven, so to speak, that one always knows one is being judged against. In the mobile money space, we've heard and said a lot about mobile money as a kind of bridge between informal and formal practices, and then we sort of try to figure out what the informal are and how we build a better bridge. Or, Ignacio Mas has talked about bridges to cash, imagining mobile money as basically a kind of mobile phone ATM type service. We also think about bridges to cashlessness, right? Sort of mobile money being a kind of on-ramp to a world of more digital payments to cash light. And Scott yesterday very provocatively challenged us to think about, if we're talking about cash light or cashless, like what's cash heavy? What does that look like? Because even I am, I'm not cash heavy, and yet I think, yes, there is cash in my wallet. And all kinds of crazy things like receipts and stuff, and funny little consumer protection devices that we think that we don't need anymore. And even though I feel perfectly secure in the stability of my bank, I still get them and keep them and stick them here. I think it's important for us to recognize that there are still people like me in the world, even here in Southern California. Now, I said that we haven't really seen sort of a whole operating system plop down on the world of transactions. But I think there is one sense in which we kind of have, or at least we have the rudiments of one that then we can all start investigating in more depth. And that is cash, right? Cash itself and the cash distribution system and the cash cycle. Yesterday, we lingered over some of the characteristics of cash that made people want to use it even when offered another alternative. And I just want to sort of put some of those out there so that we can think about them, right? One is the fact that cash is non-account based. Now, that's great for certain purposes, like sort of speed and anonymity and so on. It's also terrible, in a sense, for things like fraud, right? If it can't be tracked and traced, then I have no redress if you take my cash. Cash settles at par. And that's another really interesting thing about it, right? If I give you $5, you get $5, end of story. There's apparently no transaction fee, but that's only if we background all the externalities in the cash cycle that make cash actually often expensive, and the risks that then cost, especially for the poor. Cash settles immediately, right? I give it to you and that's it, it's settled, that's the end. That's kind of great, but in the common law tradition, if I do this, whoever picks it up actually holds title to it, right? Even though y'all just saw me do it, if someone wanted to take it, it's yours. You gonna go get it, Jake? It's yours, and I could then take you to court and stuff. We could fight about it, but title passes to the bearer. Period. Right? We need to then argue about, well, really, it was a gift that Bill meant to give to someone in the room, or really it was just part of a performance, and he intended for someone to pick it up, et cetera, but the title transfers, so settles immediately. And then, I mentioned it's sort of because of its materiality, costly to transport. Now, these are some of the things that we know about cash already, and we've had some illustrations of some of these features of cash in the papers, especially yesterday. But there are some things that came up yesterday and today that I just want to underscore that hint at some of the things that we really don't yet have quite a good handle on about cash and the diversity of uses of cash and understandings of cash. And I have to turn the page of my notes back to yesterday. I was very interested in Lakshmi's distinction between cash in hand and cash in mobile. and how we think about the relationship between cash in hand and cash in mobile. There were some, tantalizing little tidbits in some of the papers around, isn't it unusual? And I'm thinking of Vivian's work and her colleagues' work, and some of her other work as well that she's done through IMTFI. Isn't it unusual that while you would think that mobile money would be great for small value storage, and people are using coins for small value storage, the coin small value storage doesn't seem to make that leap over into the mobile small value storage somehow. And that raises a whole other set of issues that we heard a little bit about yesterday, both in her talk and in some other talks, in Eric's talk from Peru, for instance, and also in the work of Taylor Nelms, who's one of the researchers here at IMTFI, one of the graduate students, around the whole question of denomination, right? We kind of think, $5 is $5 is $5, but it's not always the same $5 if it's all in ones, if it's all in quarters, if it's a crisp new bill, or if it's an old tattered bill. And, there are some very interesting and provocative things in the dilemma posed by high denomination banknotes that came up in Eric's paper. And there's, I think, quite a lot of work there to explore on how big bills help manage social relationships or stand in the way of social relationships because they're hard to break and hard to then disperse. Denomination also comes up in all the stuff around coin that we heard in a number of the papers, where whenever it popped up, I tried to make a note like, oh, these people are talking about coins, not about bills, and that was fascinating to me. Now, another thing I want to kind of come out to around cash is it seems that a lot of the sort of relationships of intermediation that people talked about here had their root in a kind of cash-based system. And I'm thinking both of I can't pronounce it, but the Cameroon grasslands sort of solidarity groups, John G, the John G, which Devine really provocatively framed as a kind of game of solidarity. But then I'm also thinking about some of the gambling and betting behavior, which is another kind of game of solidarity, right? Which has migrated in some instances onto the mobile platform. So I start thinking, well, what is it about in John G that maybe doesn't easily migrate, but about betting that maybe does easily migrate? Are there things that we can learn about each of these games of solidarity by thinking about them together, right? And it's sort of uncomfortable to do that, right? Because the one is this sort of nice social good thing. The other is this destructive, addictive, bad thing. Formally, they're quite similar, right? Bunches of men, in many instances, getting together with bunches of money that circulates among them somehow for a while. So I wanted to put that out there. The other thing that was just amazing in this conference was how many papers talked about various kinds of middlemen and women. And there were the patrons, there were the lovers, right? There were a lot of lovers. It was very interesting, all the things that were going on there. And there are the employers, right? Which is sort of, I think that often in the kind of work that we do, we're focusing on a kind of imagined like end user or client. And we think it's just like the person who is using a mobile money account. And we forget about things like, the merchant or the employer of that person, the merchant selling goods to them or the employer of them, who's really serving a crucial role in these sub-ecosystems, these sub-economies that are structuring things like loans and remittance systems. And for that matter, too, there's a really important thing to be said about the intermediary in determining whether something is a loan or a remittance, right? And that's really fascinating to me. When does something become a debt that people actually will objectify as a debt and demand some kind of repayment? And when is it, the gift that doesn't have to be returned? Often it seems that question is solved by the answer that you give to what's the nature of that intermediary. So one other kind of big wide-angle thing just about everyone's methods, so to speak, and I think we'll linger on this a bit more tomorrow. It really strikes me that in this set of research that we've heard from, there are basically two big kind of orientations, and they didn't really meet very often. And I think we might want to try to force them to meet up tomorrow. And it wasn't what I might have expected. Like, we didn't actually have so much of the, you know, qualitative versus quantitative, or anthropology versus everybody else, or economists versus everybody else, or whatever. Instead, we had this kind of thing where you had some people talking about things like trust and obligation, questions about, you know, who is the user, Bridget posed it, and other kinds of sort of, you know, kinship and marriage and family, all framed in social terms. So you had people talking about social relationships. And then you had another kind of language, analytical language of obligation and relationship, that also tied into things like durability and value, that was framed in cosmological terms, right? Not necessarily about the social relationships among all these people that I'm talking about or talking to, but the cosmology, the whole sort of worldview that encompasses all of the relations that people are involved with, that are basically sort of conceptual relationships. And it's this, you know, in Sean's talk that he was getting at, or sort of what are the intersection between the sort of cosmological and the sociological. How do we think about those interconnections when we see people dealing in questions of money that ultimately are also about questions of, you know, life and death, right? And that's where sort of, you know, to me, again, gold and small livestock become really interesting, because the one endures forever, the other dies, but in this cycle that endures forever. So you get this weird life-death kind of thing going on all the time. And, you know, animals, too, are great because, like us, they seem to have kinship. So they both fit into our cosmological idea, but they can also be our adopted little brothers and sisters or siblings, and, you know, until we eat them, right? So anyhow, those were just some of the kind of, you know, out there Bill things that I wanted to say for now, and to offer as fodder for discussion and for tomorrow. I also, you know, did want to underscore Professor Alati Venkatesh's challenge to everybody, because this is something that we think about quite long and hard here with the researchers who have gone through IMTFI, and now with all you new folk, which is, you know, how do we think about taking the research that you're doing here, and again, I know you're not all finished, and, you know, you got a bunch of time yet to go on your projects, and translate it across into various different languages, into various constituencies. How do we make the work speak to, you know, academia, speak to policy, speak to industry, speak to different sectors in industry? You know, how do we even, like, speak to each other, given the diverse analytical languages that we all bring to this endeavor? That's a real challenge that Alati has left us with. It's a real important challenge that I want us to all think about going forward. It's also, conveniently enough, one of the purposes of IMTFI to help you make those translations. And tomorrow in the little workshop, Ivan and Smokey will be talking and leading you through some discussion and exercises around both sort of looking at your work in a new way, thinking about, as you go back into your research, how you can kind of adjust or tweak, or, you know, keep going on the same track, but maybe with awareness of something else off to the side. At the same time that we're going to outline for you some of the tools that we've built up here over the past, you know, 5 years to help our researchers get their stuff out there. So, you know, I won't sort of belabor it now, but, you know, you will soon, if not already, all be connected in a listserv where you all can, like, talk to each other, and that happens, and that's fun, and et cetera. We also have on our website a pretty extensive Mendeley database. It's a sort of bibliographic tool that also has the bibliographic entries, but also a lot of the PDFs of articles that, if you're in a university where you don't have access to journals and such that we do here in the University of California, you'll be able to get access to these things more easily. It's a whole library that we built up specifically around money, technology, and financial inclusion. And we also have our team, and, you know, one of the core functions of the team of graduate student researchers and the postdocs, plus me and Jenny and John, is to help you all develop your work and get it out there. I'm very pleased that now, 5 years on, we have a whole library of articles that have been published, of policy reports, and a nice little bookshelf about that big of books from work that's been produced out of research from IMTFI. So we are here to help you with that challenge, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow. So I want to formally close by thanking all of you for coming and for bringing your work in progress here and for listening to each other and engaging with each other and forging new friendships, which is always a delight to see. Like for me, like the best thing is at the end of day one when you see everybody's like talking to everybody else, and it's great. And everyone knows everyone all of a sudden. So I want to thank you for that. I also want to say a few other quick thank yous. First, to the graduate student researchers who have been helping with all the background work of this. Nathan and Robbie had to go, but we'll thank them in absentia. And Sean Malin is in the back there and has been helping out. And you want to wave? Wave. There's Sean. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Taylor Nelms, who joined us today, having returned from a job visit. I also want to thank Smokey Musarai, one of the postdocs, and Ivan Small, the other postdoc. You'll be hearing a lot more from them tomorrow. This whole thing wouldn't work without the terrific facilities support we have here from the conference center and Ian and William in the back, who are doing all the live stream and making all this stuff happen magically, and also for getting our person from Brisbane piped in here yesterday. So thank you all for helping out with here. John Seaman now has enough documentation on all of you to steal all of your identities and set up bank accounts in the Caymans. So we either thank him or we don't thank him for that. I'm not sure. But thank you, John, for all the hard work. And of course, Jenny Fan, who does so much for everything and for me and for all of us and for all of you, and will continue to do things for all of us and all of you. Thank you very much. Yay. There might have to be a presentation of gifts later, but that's going to happen at dinner, okay? So I think I will just formally close. Thank you all so much once again. The buses will come in a little bit to take us to dinner. And please mingle, continue to, we're just going to keep feeding you, right? So eat more snacks, and then we're going to have Japanese food, which isn't filling at all, so you'll be fine, okay? And you can just like run around the track a few times. Oh, I think Aladi, were you going to say a word? Oh, well. Thanks. Thank you. And this could go on forever, like thank you to the moderators, some of whom are still here. Thank you to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for supporting this venture, and to Jake and Rebecca for coming today. Thank you to, who else? Thank you to, oh wow, this is really bad. I'm the Dean of the Social Sciences, and I didn't thank myself. Thank you to the School of Social Sciences at UC Irvine. Thank you, me. You're welcome, me. Thank you to Liz Loesch for continuing to live vlog and get carpal tunnel syndrome for us. We appreciate it. I think I can't think of anything else. So there. Enjoy, and like I said, the buses will be coming, and we'll have a nice dinner. Thank you all very much.